Okay, it says we are live. Now I'm going to ask you to just talk back to me a little bit so we can hear the audio.
Sure.
Just waiting for the little live symbol to show up on my face. So can you say a few things because it's going to pop in and that'll be about 2 to 5 seconds delayed.
Yes, welcome everybody, and thank you, Paul, for inviting me. I found his invitation on Facebook.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Good.
To talk
Okay.
about our spiritual gamer thing here.
So we're ready to begin. We're live. If you wanted to present it on your page, you can do it afterwards too. It doesn't matter. So I'm here. I'm Paul, and I'm here with Benjamin Harrison, the spiritual gamer. It's Harrison, correct? I want to make
Yeah.
sure I'm 100% correct. I put out the call to people that have like-minded possibilities, and I'm here to hear and learn and allow you to hear and learn. And I'm going to ask them some questions as we go through, but it's going to be a very holistic exploration of what Benjamin's learned and his knowledge so that people can see it and people can find him if that resonates with them and want to work with him. So go ahead, Benjamin. Let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you, everyone. My name is Benjamin Harrison. I am the spiritual gamer, and I had my spiritual awakening about 3 years ago, like a very deep one. And I'll perhaps go into like what led into that a bit later. But just to focus in on the spiritual gamer aspect of what happened there is I've been playing video games since I was 5, which is a relatively new phenomenon in our modern age. And I was at my sister's house sitting for like a week alone, just kind of in isolation up there. And I was playing my games like I normally do, and just kind of got this message, just download that I'm a spiritual gamer. And I was like, oh, what's that about? And so I kind of was like, oh yeah, like the way I'm perceiving and controlling and playing my virtual avatar is a reflection of what I'm doing in the game of life. I'm perceiving my body, able to perceive my body. I'm controlling this sort of biological, intelligent system that is also being able to be controlled like a video game avatar. So I'm playing the game of life with my virtual avatar and my real life avatar body. And originally I'd wanted to create some sort of business, but I never like had a direct inspiration from my higher self of like a specific pathway. And so that seemed to be the initial inspiration. And my sister also has been running like a spiritual business for 5 years. And I've been talking to her about different stuff. And then when I went up to her and was like, oh, like the spiritual gamer, and she's like, ooh, like that feels different. And I was like, okay. So I sort of for a year had all this stuff rolling around in my head and started creating stuff with her, logos and stuff. And we're putting together little elements. And I also did my own exploration where initially I was just curious because I've sort of seen through the illusion of separation. And I had been practicing these heart mind coherence techniques, which HeartMath Institute has been researching and has 30 years of research, which is essentially like activating a flow state and then learning to maintain it with heart-centered focused breathing. And they have like a little piece of tech. Actually, well, I don't have to show you, but there's a little piece of tech that goes on your ear and it hooks up to an app in your phone, and you can sit there and practice this breathing technique. And it gives you like data read out that essentially is telling you when you're in a coherent state and when you're not. So it's basically saying like, yeah, you're in the flow state or you're not. And you start noticing very interesting processes of thinking and the way you feel, because you'll think about doing the dishes or something while you're doing this meditation and automatically you drop in coherence. So I started noticing like the amount of subconscious programming we operate from rising to the surface that takes you out of flow states, there's a lot of research on that, which is essentially like an optimal experience, right? Most people want to like experience this flow of life and just kind of spontaneously, organically allowing intuition to be allowed in and then acted on in the moment, which kind of like keeps the flow cycle going. And so I
Would you call that a meditative state? Not everybody knows what a flow state is, but people
yeah, it's a meditative state, but you're not dropping down into relaxation. Like, you're actually heightening your awareness. So you're moving up, and that's what this research shows is you're actually in a heightened state of awareness and your eyes are open, but it's like super present.
presence is the huge thing. Is that a lot of people are this far out of their energy field because they're scared and they're worried in their survival. The minute you're in presence and you start to ground your feet, you feel different in your body. So that's essentially what you're calling flow state for most people.
Yeah, which regulates the nervous system. Like, you drop and your body automatically regulates, and you basically are like creating a space internally for healing to be, which is kind of what healing only needs. It's just like space to be, and it's a natural process. So eventually these techniques and practices, you create baselines that you automatically operate from naturally, because you just train your system to operate from that state. And so, it is a meditation, but it's also kind of not, compared to typical definitions of it, because you're not like you're not zoning out, because I couldn't play video games while my eyes are closed.
Well, and a good example that I see in my world of flow state for most people is when they're driving their car. They're on the freeway and they're driving with other cars, responding to all of it, but you don't remember any of what happened to get here. It's like, I'm home, but you're completely entrained or in hypnosis or in flow state, and basically you were just receiving, and you got knocked out of flow state because some guy cut you off in traffic, and then you'll remember all that, but you won't remember the free flow and everything and merging and all this stuff.
Yeah, this will be interesting for people if they think about, like, when they're looking at their phone or they're like changing the CD, you're like, how did I not crash into anything?
Yeah.
Like, you're kind of not paying attention, but you are absorbing information from your peripheral. And I've noticed that myself tons of times. I'm like, man, I wasn't even paying attention. Like, how did I not smash into somebody?
Absolutely.
And so yeah, that's a perfect example, a simple one that will often be overlooked or maybe not noticed because it's just such a natural kind of deep state of flow. And we often kind of miss these very profound experiences that can be a normal part of our daily life. And of course, it's natural to kind of drop out of coherence and flow as situations arise, but you can train yourself to not let the external stressors become internalized and turn into stress, because there's a big difference there between what's happening externally and what's happening internally. And that's also what part of my whole spiritual gamer jazz is about, is mastering the internal world through using the power of play and these sort of very simple but profound and have a lot of science to back up like what's going on.
So can we join some of this together? Because essentially what I hear is you're saying that when you're gaming, you're essentially in a state of flow. You're now in an alternate reality, in a universe. All you see is the TV screen. All you see is that your fingers doing the controller. After you've been gaming for a long time, you don't even feel the controller anymore. It's just an extension of you. And now you're earning all these things. You're fighting battles. You're getting the gold. You're getting all these things, which is in your flow state, and you're creating in this reality through this piece of hardware. So it's essentially life, but it takes you out of life into like virtual reality, where all your energy is focused on this game instead.
Yeah, which is another kind of element of why I thought this may be helpful for people or younger generations or even people older generations, because I was using video games as an escape to kind of tune out rather than tune into myself. And that if I'm doing that in one realm of my life, it's going to play over into the other, even if we're not maybe aware of this. And so I wasn't having as much fun while playing video games. There wasn't joy happening. And I was just at some point kind of like becoming aware of it. I'm like, why am I even doing something I'm not having fun with? How did I even get to this state in the first place? And so basically I'm like, well, these spiritual intentions and stuff work. So, and I've been doing that for 3 years. So why can't I incorporate that into my gaming space? And going back to like removing the separation of illusion, I just did an experiment for myself for 3 months. I was like, I wonder if I can increase my gaming performance by setting intentions, like for when I moved into a session for an hour, and then each match. Oh, a thumbs up myself.
Beautiful.
And then I hooked up the HeartMath monitor to my ear to see if I could remain internally and practice these meditations while I was playing the video game, just as my own experiment. And I did that for 3 months. And it took like a month and a half, but I started noticing, like, when you're playing video games and you get killed, like in PvP, like this little thing pops up that says what place you're in, and you're like, oh, I'm in last place, and then boom, you're like dropped out of flow. And I started noticing that I was judging my gameplay, which is what we do in life, we're judging ourselves. And so I had to like train myself not to look at certain elements of the game that are just normal to look at, right? You're just like boom, boom, boom. Because I was like, what place does it matter I'm in until the match is done? Like, that's all that matters. Yep. So I started training my brain to like exclude everything. And if I was having negative judgments, I would flip them automatically, and then practice and I didn't pay attention to the tech, but I just let it run for the hour, and then I'd go back into it and look at the data later and see what was going on. And it was interesting because I was in high coherent states, for sometimes higher coherent states than I was when I wasn't playing video games, when I was just doing it naturally, which is fascinating.
So let's just tie it back. Flow and coherence are the same thing, just because you've used two different words. I just want people to be clear.
Yeah, so like from their HeartMath's perspective, like heart-mind coherence is essentially a flow state that you can enter into. So there's different terms they use for it, but it's essentially kind of the same thing. Just like a regulation of the nervous system. And video games have many therapeutic benefits to them, as well as with some dopamine programming that gives you a lot of instant gratification. Mm-hmm. So there's an element there that we can, an unempowering element that we can turn into an empowered element if we move into video games, which is part of what I'm passionate about, is like using that to actually master the self. So self-mastery through, it doesn't have to be video games, of course, but that's just what I'm interested in. So that's why I created this.
But that same link can create addiction as well, right? Where you're getting dopamine hits from just having pleasure in the game of winning, mm-hmm. but it doesn't tie back to your living of life, so it can create this alternate mm-hmm. persona or whatever.
Yeah. And I noticed for myself, I lost girlfriends because I went and played video games with my friends, and I remember one, I was like, hey, is it cool if I like ditch you essentially and go play video games with my friend? And she's like, do whatever you want. And I was too dumb at the time to like be like, oh, she's basically telling me that's not okay, and she ended up breaking up with me. I kind of don't blame her. And so yeah, like our relationships can suffer. Perhaps you're tuning out from your family too much, or you do want to like maybe have a girlfriend or a relationship, but you're stuck in this online community, and those are powerful spaces, because I've made great friends for 8 years playing with online friends, and that's not to be overlooked or overshadowed. But I noticed in myself that I was tuning out from the real world and things I really wanted to do, which was connect with other people.
And that's essentially a fake reality, which is living outside yourself and really living in your brain rather than mm-hmm. in your body, because your body's not actually participating other than your fingers moving, or maybe if you're doing a Wii, you're hitting the tennis racket or something like that. But yeah.
The virtual reality is a much more immersive for that realm. But there's definitely a potential for disconnection, and I've noticed too dissociation, because I've read like some threads and quotes from pro gamers that say like, I just don't know who I am when I turn the console off. Yeah. So there is people experiencing dissociation from their identity, their real life identity.
So explain that a little deeper, so because some people might not know what disassociation is, please.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess it's when you apply too much of your identity within this virtual realm because you're operating at a very high level, right? Because these guys are really good, and even kids. Some of these kids are like magician gamers, and they're like schooling people at 10 years old, and they're operating at a super high level. And so that high level of identification with their abilities within the virtual game, when they get back into real life, they just don't see the same progress, or their own identity seems to be down here while this one's up here.
Yeah.
And when you have to, like, you want to learn martial arts or something, it's not going to be like a video game, because video games are designed to be easy enough to keep you playing while also having a level of difficulty. So there's a very programmed, perfected balance that these people know what they're doing when they're designing.
It's on purpose that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I read a book called The Healthy Gamer, and he's an MD, and he explained all of the brain processes and what's going on, like not just the negative side, but also the therapeutic side of gaming. So I've sort of explored that and understand enough. I can't speak to it as clearly as he can, but that's an interesting book if you're trying to maybe help your kids or understand what your kids are going on or why they may be struggling in school. Because, when you have to learn something like martial arts and you're like, it's so easy in the video game space, you give up, and you're like, why am I even doing this? Why am I taking the test? Or why am I like pushing through something difficult like learning math or martial arts, or when I can just play a video game and like feel great about myself, And so it becomes a very, very immersive, kind of potentially addictive problem.
So you created an interesting thing there, that we lose ourselves in that reality. So now how do we make the bridge to being a gamer in this reality and now being an avatar and actually getting money and getting the relationship, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, I guess it's just a balance, of course, like everything, to the best of our ability. But having someone to help you to help you become aware and really identify the things that you want, and consciously.
And where's the explain the awareness, because that's the key right there.
Yeah, for me, it happened naturally and organically, and I guess it would of course depend on the individual, but I mean, that's why I'm talking about this stuff, is perhaps there is an awareness around paying more attention to what you really want and what you desire through different connection. And I also think that that video games don't have to be some sort of negative looping cycle, but you have to move into them with that conscious awareness. And that's sort of why I'm talking about this stuff in the first place, is that just from my own experience of creating this process, that I saw results from it, and that's why I'm speaking to it now. And this is a middle path. Like, originally when I put together this, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go teach programmers how to enter flow states and be better programmers and push through limitations. But I'm refining the brand because it's more about offering it to anybody who likes the perspective of playing the game of life, which should be enjoyable. And other research I got led to, which is essentially like the power of play, and Dr. Stuart Brown and this other Dr. Karen have come to the realization that normal schooling, modern schooling, takes 400 repetitions to create a new neural synapse and unlock that DNA to learn that skill in the brain. But when play is involved, it takes 20 to 40 repetitions. So there's a biological imperative for us to be playful in life. That's, if you look at mammals, us and mammals in the world, the first thing they're doing is playing. And they're wrestling and they're fighting with each other, and that's how they learn the skills to survive. So being adaptable and being resilient there's a way to accelerate any learning skill through the power of play with conscious intent. And that's what I incorporated, was a flow state plus the play equals an accelerated process of self-mastery. And so that's sort of what I'm offering to people, is, instead of working harder, and a lot of these people are gonna, are pushing, not to say that confidence and working harder is bad, but perhaps there's a quicker accelerated rate just from being playful, and instead of like having to like work harder to self-master yourself, there is another path, and it should be more of a playful, enjoyable experience.
So for clarity, you've used the new word self-mastery. Explain what self-mastery is for people.
Yeah, it's really inner work, and it has to do with attitudes, fearlessness, engaged detachment. I mean, there's a lot of them there. I mean, that's stuff I've learned.
How about leaning into discomfort and dealing with your discomfort and your emotions and your trauma?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's about, well, that's, I mean, kind of what I was going through naturally with playing video games. Is like I'm not having fun, and that was tension. But I used the intention. I used that tension to put intention into moving out of that space. And so, that's why you get anxiety, and you get anticipation when moving into something new, is because that tension is actually fueling your growth. And instead of like pushing that away or resisting it, bringing that energy in to transmute it and move through the process and do the inner work. Which, self-mastery is essentially just inner work, shadow work. It's you can speak to it in many different ways, and we do it naturally, but there's also a lot of indoctrination and programming to resist the darker, uncomfortable aspects of ourselves. Yeah.
So could we draw this conclusion based on what you said, so that self-mastery is basically unbinding us from what no longer serves us or wasn't serving us, and taking it out of the shadow and bringing it into our full awareness?
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement. It's an identification. It's
It's kind of like in Dungeons and Dragons, right? You have a charisma, and you have all these different things, and you grow over time as a character, which allows you to talk to people more and more likelihood of getting a good result. That's your self-mastery. All of a sudden, if you can deal with your shit and you're not a wounded little boy or girl, you are basically now standing in your trigger, and I'm in my power at that point. It might be like freaking scary and fiery inside my body, but I'm not hurting another person like, fuck you, shut the fuck up, or excuse my French.
yeah. The
That's
projection.
what we'll do.
Yeah, the projection of that old character, because we often have a lot of different internal characters we're role playing, and they're in conflict with each other. So
Absolutely.
how do I move out of that? Like, well, I have to acknowledge it and realize that that's not like some absolute that I need to operate from. It's just simply something that is in the now. But I have the ability to change that, especially if I'm aware of it, and I can imagine I don't have to be that person.
Would you call that the observer?
Oh yeah. The observer, the identification. I mean, there's a lot of
Seeing yourself in that moment, why you're reacting and what's feeling inside your body. And then the self-mastery is like, I'm not going to let that overtake me this time.
And allowing ourselves to recreate ourselves as many times as we need, because again, it's like a video game. You get to respawn as many times as you want. You're like this eternal little virtual avatar. If Mario falls down the hole or gets killed by a Koopa or whatever, you just continue and do the level again. And if you end up running out of 3 continues and you die, you just start over and then play again, or look for those secret levels where you can, or little tricks, the cheat codes, you can get a bunch of lives. And I mean, that's essentially what's going on with us. We are eternal beings, and we get to recreate ourselves, and we should be recreating ourselves as many times as we need to. I think it's a continuous process of climbing the mountaintop and getting to the summit, and then there's another mountaintop to climb, and we keep repeating this process. And just the reflections, like, I don't think, if video games were not a very complete reflection of our lives, I don't think we would have been able to decode them and reprogram them into the game in the first place. Like we're playing a video game,
Yeah.
and we pulled that from our imagination and somehow decoded and reprogrammed our experiences into these games to have like a co-participation um, experiential activity that is mirroring what we're doing in real life. And I think that's why video games are blowing movies and music out of the water right now, is because the spectators, like, we want to be in the game, we want to be playing. We're becoming these sovereign system operators, and that's what the awakening's about, is realizing that we can create our reality and um, co-create our hologram and our video game in every moment, and that's what's happening. And so paying attention to the internal dialogue and the processes that are not empowering in ourselves is crucial for us to becoming a master. And that we're gaining experience and leveling up and collecting gear and changing our skins and upgrading vehicles and upgrading our gear. And Destiny game is one of my favorite because they're guardians of the light, and they have like this little like electronic tech ghost thing, and the ghost talks to you. It's sort of like your higher mind or something, and anytime you die, the ghost helps respawn you. He brings you back to life, and it's very cool. There's a lot of spiritual elements floating around.
So can I ask you something? Because stepping back into my 3D, it's like you're asking people to believe that life's just a big game, and that could kill me. That could make me bankrupt. That could make me all this kind of stuff. So what evidence do you have? And I agree with your perspective fully, but I want to hear you say it. What evidence do you have that shows that you're truly gaming in this illusion or this matrix? Because most people think it is a reality and it's hard, cold, hard truth, and you have to be all this kind of stuff. But I find every time you change the code of the game, which is your story inside your head with self-mastery, something new will show up. It'll become better. It'll become more in alignment. So can you tell us and the people that are listening, what evidence do you have that's shown in your life that this is making big differences for people?
Yeah, I mean, for those scientifically driven, I would look into quantum physics, which you don't have to like get all crazy with it and understand all of it, but there's a lot of research out there if you want to start looking up the holographic universe. And explore that sort of stuff. That'll give you some new evidence in quantum physics that's starting to arise. And I'm sure a lot of people that are exploring spiritual podcasts and stuff, they're all talking about the simulation in the game, which is essentially like, yeah, we're in like a holodeck with the safety features turned off, so you can get hurt. And I'm not saying to like be,
but as a spiritual being, you're not being hurt, but in your physical avatar, you're being hurt, which can be a death, which is a whole bunch of repeated lifetimes and karma and dying and all this kind of stuff. But if you're having repeated lifetimes, isn't it like a game? Like when you die, you just re-up and all of a sudden your character is coming in again for a new experience, but a version of the last experience that's maybe different, but you're choosing what level you're going to go in at.
Yeah. I'm definitely not saying, because I do believe our bodies, our vessels are sacred temples and they should be protected. So I'm not saying be wild and crazy. I mean, people do this anyways, though. They climb crazy mountains and stuff, and some people enjoy that. So, but I'm not saying, of course, be so
unaware that you cause yourself to die or you go into drug abuse or God knows what.
Be so wild with these perspectives that you go hurt yourself, and that somehow, no matter what you do, it's not going to be painful because it's just an illusionary hologram anyways. There's such a paradox going on here, but it's more just a perspective of like enjoying the game of life, just like
you're talking about a mental mindset, right? Small changes here, and then watch for the illusion to change on the outside, and then you're going to start to see that it is almost a game. It's like leaning into, I came in and experienced dating problems or problems with women or whatever. I created that karmically and a whole bunch of other variables, and now I'm leaning into having hard conversations with women, standing up for myself with my ex-wife, all these kinds of things, which changes the whole characteristics of the game. I'm no longer in the program of the angry divorced ex or whatever. I'm in one where we work together and we love and respect each other, which goes into my kids. and changes their reality as well. Those are the simple, tiny little shifts that start to give massive gains, is what I've found.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what we're all trying to do through these our playing the game of life, is to change the internal world to such a degree that we start getting mirrored experiences from our internal, now more in alignment and a higher frequency state. So we're doing the internal work, and that's being sort of projected out into the mirror of reality, and or into the hologram if you want to get that. And we're trying to like get the tangible physical experience of our inner work reflected to us through the hologram. Right. So speaking to like answering your question very clearly about what I'm starting to notice come into my field is this one guy from Kenya who just randomly I added him, and he's mentoring kids and he was like, hey, I like your spiritual gamer stuff. And like a couple days ago, I was like doing whatever I was doing in the backyard, and he's like, can I call you? And I was like, yeah, why not? Whatever, dude. Like, I don't know who this guy is, but I just stepped into it and then ended up talking to him for 45 minutes. And I did this with, I've had like a conversation a week with another guy in India who's included or in some sort of play programming, schooling program, and talked to him for an hour. And he was like grilling me with questions, but everything I was saying, he was loving. And this guy in Kenya, like I gave him my free ebook, which is on my website for thespiritualgamer.com for people that want to explore the process that I created with HeartMath techniques plus my power of play incorporation. Like that's how I did the experiment when I was gaming. But he dove in and started teaching kids like the next day. So that's an answer to what you're saying. Is my hologram is starting to reflect to me people that actually are hearing what I'm saying, and it's like, oh, that's cool. And of course, we want self-doubt validation. That's incredibly important, is you always want to have your own self-validation.
That's self-love as well. I prefer to take it all the way to the end, because self-validation can be a negative thing if we're looking for outside of ourselves, but it's people loving what you're offering because it's pure and it's true.
Yeah,
and that's how we met, right? So
it's structured around love, and it's a heart-centered, intentional gaming approach. To get some of the anger and unhealthy competition and things we experience. And another pro gamer said that too. A quote I read was, "I'm sorry for what I said while playing video games." And stuff like this happens all the time. And even me, like I was a kid, I remember spitting on the TV. I was so mad that I died in the game. I was like banging the controller against my head, and like I just think back to those memories. I'm like, what was I doing?
But flip that into reality. How many times does that happen in traffic? How many times does that on Facebook? How many times does those things, exact same things, where you get a meltdown and now you have a choice? Do I get melted down and freak out and go into some old story, or do I say, hey, no, I'm not going to participate this time. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, that's self-mastery right there. And when we have to practice it, and train our minds and our hearts to be stronger than the external experiences, and that's part of the self-mastery journey. And so yeah, I'm starting to get the reflections coming back where people are interested in. And I also had original intentions of trying to teach this stuff to kids, but I'm not in a space where I can mentor kids, and I've never done it, so I would be fumbling through that process pretty badly, which is okay. But this guy is already tuned in and teaching kids and stuff in Kenya, of all places. So that's like incredible for me. Because I'm already influencing kids over there, which like the intention, like the dream was set, and now little things are percolating up that's kind of like really connecting the circle.
So can you tie that to your leveling up in your game?
Yeah, I would say so.
What happened and what created the level ups? Because you've succeeded in level 1, now you're in 2 or 3, but it's a natural up level in the game.
Yeah, I would guess I'm going through the process of still understanding what all that is, because when you do finally level up, you're in a new territory, you're in a new level, and there's not always a map to guide you.
And the illusion we're in is leveling up at the same time. So we're being pushed and percolated to level up. The whole planet's shifting. So some of that is from the planet, but a lot of it is from your personal choice, because there's a lot of people that are still in the fucking murk and never left it because they weren't aware. They didn't have this information to start to change and work on themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're magic.
Yeah. Yeah. We all are. We're all doing the magician thing, and well, I like Star Wars stuff, so I call myself a Jedi. So yeah, using the Force to to manipulate.
That's a real thing. The Jedi comes from DJED in Egyptian mythology, and it's basically the moving of your light body and your Kundalini snakes up your body until they're fully inhabiting your body, and then you're a light warrior at that point. You have the Force, you have intuition, you have all these things. Like the thing that kind of blew my mind when I watched Star Wars for years. I read the book way back, and it just hit me about 5 years ago. It's like in a land far away and a long time ago. So this is our distant past. It looks like our future, but then it's just like, holy crap, how many times have we been around the sun, and how many times has the planet existed? It opens a whole new possibility.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It's all connected to like Orion drama and different galactic wars and stuff that is actually like Hopi Native American suppressed history too. This guy, I read this. There's a free PDF online. Robert Morning Sky, who's some sort of chief leader, and you can tell Lucas read that. It's called the Terra Papers. You can tell he read it because it's like the exact read for Star Wars. So
awesome.
these different kind of cellular memories and experiences. As we're in this kind of ascension cycle, is all coming through, and people's memories are turning online, and it's sort of being played out in movies and stuff. You could call it like a soft disclosure of sorts.
All right.
But and it's like an acknowledgement of our galactic heritage. Like we're supposed to be out there in the stars. Like, why do you think there's so many planets out there? Like, we're not supposed to be stuck here. We're supposed to be populating everywhere if we weren't suppressing our own technology.
How would you tie that back to the Matrix? Because that's the closest thing to a game that people have seen in popular culture. What's your beliefs on that?
The Matrix movie?
Movies, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a documentary of sorts.
A popular culture version of what's going on, really. You can even go into Marvel, you can even go into all these different things, and they all have elements of the truth, superpowers and ESP and telekinesis and all these things.
The multiverse, I mean, that's huge in Marvel.
Which is quantum physics. Basically, multiverse means you live out every possibility in the moment. Matrix talks about it as well. There's where he's with the architect, and there's all the screens behind him. Some of you saying F you, and others he's doing different things, because you live every single one of your choices.
Yeah. A bunch of different branching possibilities and potentials happening.
Well, and we got into it yesterday. I think it was Monica and I talking about it, and a version of you is maturing through you going through all these timelines at the exact same time, and overall you're living out every possibility as God. And basically, you're bringing it all back to eventually be this more expanded version of your God self. You talked about God mode in video games and stuff like that, where you can automatically walk through walls and all this kind of stuff. Once the rules are suspended, we can do almost anything. And where do the rules come in?
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, we're creating them. We're creating that. Yeah, that's actually interesting too, because I watched a really cool video on the spirituality of Star Wars, and they talked about like why part of the karma of what the Jedi created is because they took like the living cosmic force and then applied dogmatic codes to it, which isn't supposed to be the way. And so Qui-Gon was the only one why Qui-Gon was the first Jedi to be able to retain his identity and become a Force ghost. Yes. Basically, instead of being absorbed back into the cosmic force and losing his identity.
Just so people know, Obi-Wan.
Yeah. But this was Qui-Gon. Oh, yeah, Obi-Wan's master. So Qui-Gon, that's what ascension is. like that's what Qui-Gon did, is like, because we're record keepers. We're supposed to ascend and take our data and information and experiences back to God for evolution. We're not supposed to like turn into space dust in the cosmic force and lose our identity.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is none of the Jedi had done this before Qui-Gon. And if you pay attention to what he's doing in the first, the first movie, I think he dies at the end of the first movie. Yeah. But
well, Obi-Wan died in Star Wars kind of thing, but he got destroyed by Vader or whatever, which was the master of Luke or whatever, right? Or
but he didn't really die. He like ascended and turned into a Force ghost because he just wasn't there anymore. He like bilocated. He kind of just like and like bilocated and became the Force ghost. So did he die?
Which
yeah,
are all accessible as a human being, but we don't believe it and we don't understand it, and nobody's ever taught us those things.
Yeah. So Qui-Gon, if you follow his story, like his Obi-Wan says at one point, he's like, "Oh, you'd be on the order, you'd be on the council if you just followed the code." And he's like, "I'll do what I must," because he's following the will of the Force, like regardless of what the dogmatic code is. Yeah. And then like Padme says to him, like, "Oh, like the Queen wouldn't like you gambling and doing all this stuff," and he's like, "Well, she doesn't have to know." And then there was the part when, Anakin, the chosen one, who should have been embraced by all the Jedi, she was totally ostracized and not mentored. Everybody pretty much didn't trust him, which is no wonder why he ended up falling a bunch of other levels too. But Qui-Gon was basically like, "Oh, you're not going to train him? What do you mean? Like, you must see he's the chosen one." And they're like, "Oh, no, he's too old." And he's like, "Well, I'll take him on as my Padawan anyways." And they're like, No, you already have one. You can't have two. And he was ready to take off with Anakin right there. And so him listening to the will of the Force and acting only on that without the dogmatic code is what allowed him to gain the knowledge and then ascend and become the Force ghost, keep his identity. And then he taught that to Yoda, and then he taught it to other ones. So the Jedi were not like supposed to be operating from a dogmatic code or these like weird laws that they applied to some sort of cosmic intuition. And that's part of their karma of why they fell. And it's an interesting perspective we can take in our own spiritual lives, and thinking that we have to follow some sort of code. And a lot of these people will be like, "Well, this isn't dogma. And it's kind of like, well, maybe I need to look into that a little bit more, because are there dogmatic aspects to some of the spirituality things we operate in? Because I think everything is supposed to be remixed internally to a degree and have our own unique expression of whatever spiritual practices we're doing. And that's kind of why I took things from external and made my own process from it, because I think that's how true creation is supposed to be. Is supposed to be this unique expression of whatever it is. And when like typically what I've noticed, like you typically get things wrong, if you want to call it wrong, only when somebody says, "Here, do something that's already been done." And then you try to do it the way it's already been done, and then they're like, "Oh no, you didn't do it right." But if you're creating something new, if it's never been done before, how could it ever be wrong?
Be wrong, yeah. You can improve it. And the key of all of this is this constant cycle of dark and light, which is Star Wars, the Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, and Luke, and all this kind of stuff. But there would be no change without dark. So, and literally when we're in self-mastery, it's not like I'm a spiritual gamer, I'm all light and love and I can never get angry or whatever. No, you got to be in the middle, because my power is I can friggin' tear your head off if you're being stupid, if I need to protect myself, not out of my imbalance or whatever. But the minute I'm in the middle, and that's what we're all searching for. And we have probably, in my world, I've learned that the dark is the lightest light. The thing that smashes you, maybe rapes you or steals from you, and you lose all your money and all that kind of stuff. 20 years later, you might say, "Oh, I finally got a chance to find myself, and I hit bottom, and I hid in my cave for 3 years, and I figured out something about myself, and now I'm a billionaire or something later." But I had to have that to get here. And once we look at and stop judging good and bad, dark and light, all this kind of stuff, it's all part of love. It's all part of light. In its extremity, darkness is shadow, and so much darkness you can't even see light in it anymore. Or in the other way, it's so bright there's no shadow and you can't see anything. So without the middle, you're not in. That's where self-mastery is. is I can be dark, I can be light at the same time. I don't judge any of it, but I choose better for myself each time.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean being able to see the polarity and the duality of those two energies is kind of what, and even language is this way. Like you could say love and hate, kind of part of the same energetic scale in different degrees. But viewing the polarity and the darkness and light is kind of what helped. Like before, if you're just viewing everything as duality, you're spinning around at the bottom of the mountain in a cage of bouncing back and forth from
one or the other. Yep.
Stuck. Yep. But as you start like gaining awareness to seeing two as sort of the same energy that are on different degrees and their choices, you kind of start climbing the mountain and you get up to this Buddhaic sort of mind where you're now viewing polarity and duality, and you're looking down on it saying, oh, well, that's interesting. I used to be stuck down there. But because I've raised my awareness, I can now choose which direction I want to go. Which, why would I move in a direction that's not empowering?
Well, and you created a pyramid. Is that not the Trinity? Ourself and whatever, dark, light, God. We're all part of God. And when you get to the top, you can see that that's light or that's dark with no judgment. God doesn't judge anything. It's like, hey, you're having a great experience. Keep on moving. And yeah, it's hell for you and you want to die and you've been crushed into the ground. But that's when you're in that gamer mode and you're stuck in the bottomless pit and you got to find some new way to climb out of the hole that nobody else has ever figured out. You now have changed the whole reality of that, which could have been death. I'm stuck in this prison for the rest of my life. Or you can say, no, I choose different. And a ladder pops out of the roof all of a sudden because you hit a little secret button in the wall and now you're escaped and you're trying.
Yeah, this brings up interesting things with Dungeons and Dragons too, since we talked about that earlier. Because I've noticed, I know for a while there, I was simply exploring neutrality, which is up at the top, like being totally neutral. And a lot of people teach this stuff, but neutral kind of gets you nowhere.
Absolutely.
And I know, like, if you have to, what is that? I'm forgetting the name now, but you get to pick like an archetype in D&D, like chaotic good or neutral good, or these different
things that kind of frame how you do everything. Yeah,
I forget the name, but yeah, you operate from that paradigm. And I remember, so I was in this neutral state, which is kind of like, you have to shift somewhere to get somewhere with a car. Like you can't stay in neutral, otherwise you just stay in neutral and nothing happens. And so I was in that sort of neutral for a long time, and I was thinking that was sort of like the pinnacle. And I realized that I need to shift into neutral good or neutral light, you could call it that. Like I had to choose a direction at some point. And so, just to be clear on people with the whole neutral thing, it's like you want to get to the top and you can rest there in neutral for a while and they celebrate that transcendence. But at some point for myself, I had to like choose a direction to go in, and neutral good is like the goody two shoes, because you can look up the like what all of those, I can't remember the name, but what all those kind of archetypes mean in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's really fascinating because it is like a choice or something we can move into. And not to say like a goody two shoes, like you were saying, isn't powerful, but it's just a choice that I'm going to have a neutral light perspective, and but that's not, of course, ignoring the darkness. I'm going to acknowledge that as well. But that's what came up with the D&D.
Essentially, it's giving everybody the opportunity to explore their darker light side in that character, which is just an avatar that's on a piece of paper in Dungeons and Dragons, but it could be in Dungeon Siege, and I'm a 3rd level monk, whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And you build those characters in there, and then eventually you find all these gauntlets of power and all these things. Anybody that's gamed is going to know this. You have this huge treasure chest of all this cool shit, but as soon as you walk out of the game, you're nothing again. You could have a millionth level character and be able to kill zombies instantly with your spell or whatever. But now what if you bring that back into your humanness and now come to those same levels as you? And it's like, no, the world says I can't do that. And there's no wizards in this world. There's no monks or whatever, in the way that the monks don't fight or whatever. They just sit quietly and go Om and, well, bullshit. We become that in ourselves. You can be a monk. You can be a a wizard, you can be whatever. I'll tell you a really interesting example. So I go to these Amazon return stores, and it's become an interesting example in what do you call it, manifestation. So I'll go to the Amazon return stores, and it's like, hey, I need these little toner plugs or whatever. They go with a meter. So when I test cables in a wall, I plug it in on the far end. I said, someday one of these are going to show up. Well, I got it for $2 when I was there yesterday, and it's like, this is $60 worth of stuff, but somebody returned it. Amazon returns just go to this junk bin. You wait till the last day. Nobody knows what the damn thing was. So I got it $60 for $2. But this happens all the time. I needed a Google Chromecast remote. Well, I got one there. Oh, the little buttons, one of the buttons are desoldered from it, but I'll use my soldering iron. It's not broken. It just cracked off because it was pretty soldered. I'll just solder it, and I'll have a perfectly good Chrome remote, which would have cost me $18 on Marketplace, but I got it for free. So this is, I could really care less whether it happened or not, and that's the key with manifesting. And that's like getting a girlfriend, getting all this kind of stuff, to step away from the need or the pull to have that thing, or I got to get it right now, so I'm going to spend $50, but I don't have the money to buy it. It's gaming almost, because I'm just putting it out there that, universe, I'd love to have this thing. And I find more often than not, I go there and some crazy thing that nobody's interested in, it's exactly the thing I was looking for.
Yeah, and that speaks to like getting the hologram to reflect you these experiences. Exactly. But you have to go through some sort of exploration. Like you got to play with it. You're playing with it.
It's suspension of disbelief. Your rules say you can't have it, so you're saying, you're interjecting a new rule that says maybe there's a possibility of it.
Yeah, or we feel we're not worthy.
There we go.
Of being a Jedi. I mean, that's popped up a lot for me. Like, you're not, like, why would you be worthy of being, a direct expression of God?
Well, so Magdalene Manuscript's a good book to read. It talks about the light body, and it says moving the Jed, which is DJED, which is your kundalini's up your spine, which is your power, and basically enlightening your full light body, which is kind of the force. And basically, in Egyptian times, there's actually lightsabers. They were things that looks like a lightsaber. It's like a stacked thing, and light would come out the end of it, and it could be used as a weapon. So the whole Star Wars thing is based on a whole bunch of mythology that's not really mythology, that's actual absolute truth. And then it's buried in all these other things. You talked about Hopi and that guy that George Lucas read or whatever. It's happening all over the place, and they've integrated into them. So the mythology is actually a truth, but we've been told that it's not truth. So this media things and movies and books and all this kind of stuff is actually teaching us about a truth that we've been told isn't true, so that eventually one day we'll just realize it and it'll just pop into our awareness.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an individual experience, of course. Everybody has some people are getting it spontaneously. And like me, I was just randomly playing video games and got the download. And so, it's just being open to it, and allowing these experiences, to the best of your ability, and letting them happen organically, and of course, I've also I'm not going to say that some people don't get the spiritual call, but some people are comfortable in their paradigms, and that's okay. But
it's coming in ways we don't even know, and you don't have to know you're awakening to all of a sudden hit your forehead on the front step and all of a sudden realize, holy shit, my reality's fake. It's crazy. So we only got about 8 minutes left. One I wanted to touch on, because it's, you talked about the addiction aspect of video gaming and with the girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. Can you give some advice to people or kids that are maybe stuck in that level of addiction? I know you've had other levels that you've explored in your life. How do they all tie together, and what's the best advice you can give to keep out of the addictive side of gaming?
Yeah, I would say just pay attention to what you want to do other than gaming as well, because I would imagine that people have other interests, curiosities that are coming through, Like for me, I like martial arts and all that stuff, and so I sort of naturally had a balance between I was playing a lot of video games, but I also wanted to go out and play and ride bikes and do stuff. So if
So
you're
you
getting,
had enjoyment in physical reality as well as virtual reality.
yeah, I had a lot of balance there because I was born in 82, and so video games didn't. I mean, I didn't have my first real video game addiction until I was almost like 17 or 18, and then I had
Yeah.
like 5 years of just being obsessed with Ultima Online, which was
And how would that feel so that people can recognize if they're in that state?
obsessiveness. An easy one I notice is like if you have to go do something and you're like hanging on the keyboard,
Yeah.
or somebody's like, hey, it's time to go to the store and pick this up, and you're just like, somebody has to tell you 3 times until your mom or dad comes and turns the console off on you, and then you're like, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
like that's it. Like
That's
that's
getting the dopamine hit instead
yes.
of living real life.
Yeah, you're just not totally tuned into the what's going on in your actual reality enough. I mean, not to say that video games aren't happening in reality, they are, to be super clear. But you can maybe perhaps with this perspective now that I'm offering it is start paying attention to, like, there are things that you do need to do or want to do, and for some reason you're stuck in the game.
Right.
Is the game playing you, or are
Yeah.
you playing the game?
Agreed.
That's something to think about, because the momentum of the video game, which happens in the game of life too, we wake up, the momentum and the energy of the day is calm. But then something happens and we're like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. And that momentum pulls you along. Video games have exactly the same momentum to them. So that's what my process is offering, is to not be pulled along by the momentum and the strong visualization of the game, which is very strong. Like, your visual perception is taking up a lot of your computing processes in the brain. So if you're not keeping some of your awareness and centeredness in the body, your breath, like, what's going on with me emotionally, internally? Am I reacting to the game and getting frustrated? Like, what's going on there? Because from a certain perspective, you're not playing the game as a master. The game's playing you, and you're just kind of like, oh, you're stuck in it.
So it's a self-mastery is what I hear underneath that, based on words you used before. You're now becoming consciously aware of the game leading you and how it's taking away from your living of a masterful 3D life.
Yeah, a balanced life.
Balance. There you go. Because you can have it without addiction. It's kind of like having a beer on the weekend or something for some people, or I don't like beer or whatever, but sometimes they'll have a beer and it makes them feel a little tipsy and relaxed. But if you have to slam down 16 of them, maybe that's an addiction. Maybe that's not self-mastery, that's escape.
Yeah. Or I've noticed people saying like they didn't even realize they were pouring the drink until it was already poured down their mouth.
Yeah.
Addiction,
because that's in their trance, right?
Yeah. Sort of. It's just a sort of unconscious.
Well, it's an escape, right? It's like, I'm going to feel good as soon as I have this. And then it's tied into their subconscious mind saying, I got to have something to numb me because I can't take the intensity of the reality, which is a video game. I can go into an embedded reality and I can win and I can survive by dying and whatever, which you don't have that option here.
Yeah. And it touches on the instant gratification aspects of the program in video games as well. This is what's happening in alcohol. It's a quick fix. It's easy,
Yeah,
and so becoming aware of that potential within video games will be helpful for everybody.
Well, and ultimately, so let's kind of tie this all up. So essentially you're saying that to recognize the world as changeable, like a video game, and to have changes based on your up-leveling or changing or becoming aware or gaining a skill in the game or getting that sacred item or whatever it is essentially what you're doing, but it's in 3D things like having a relationship, having dates, being married, having kids, having a job, going up against your boss is the same thing as like conquering a level. But, and if you look at it as, okay, I can stay down here at the bottom of the pyramid, but the big boss is at the top. Why do you think they call them big bosses or whatever? Because I'm going to have to go up that pyramid and conquer Donkey Kong or whatever by throwing some shit at him or bouncing on his barrels or whatever. Ultimately, that's exactly what we're doing in life, is how do I stand up to that boss? How do I get my power back from that boss? Once you got the power back from the boss is this big, and you could really care less because you left the job or you let him be a peon all by himself. Essentially, to stand in self-mastery, which is what you call it, you're now taking your power back from the boss and never again getting stuck in that game.
Yeah, and just like Link, you know, as he goes around and collects keys and treasure, you know, for a treasure chest, but he doesn't know where it is, but he has to go around pushing rocks that he's never pushed before, and then you do it and you find a secret level, and then you go down there and then there's a big boss, and then you find the treasure chest, you open it, and you get a little piece of your heart.
Yep.
And now you're more resilient to fight the next boss, you know.
Well, and guess what? You can't go to the next level. You can't go to the new awareness until you've dealt with that thing, because that's the level keeper before you can go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So is that your fear? Is that your addiction? Is that your whatever? There's something in everybody's life that is a wall that's impenetrable. It's like, oh, I'm a video game addict or whatever, and I just play games all day. Well, you're not in your own reality anymore. What's wrong with your reality? Why are you disassociating, which is essentially stepping out of your body into playing video games because you feel safe there and you feel better than you are? But that as soon as the game turns off or the Xbox fries or whatever, you can never play that a game again, or the hard drive goes, you're screwed. That's the fakeness of that reality. But if you realize that we're in past lives, we're dealing with karma, we're 50% of the DNA of our parents, so we're actually picking up all their programming and all their shit, which is lineage trauma and epigenetics. We're actually cleaning up far more than just our quantum physical self. We're cleaning up all of our parents above us and making things better for our kids after us.
Yeah. I mean, it's really tuning into the main mission. Is you know, I think this is the time now where we can all step into this and really change our history. Like, we have the ability to rewrite it, and that's what we're doing. Is we're bringing in these ancestors, these bloodlines, these karmic imprints, traumas. Yep. And it's a beautiful thing if, like, you realize how important our mission is here and now.
And what would you say our mission is then?
Well, there's many different facets to it, of course.
The base one.
Yeah, I think ancestral healing.
Cleaning it up all. We're basically the medicine for everything before us and anything before us and anything after us. So essentially, if we live our best possible life and we clean up what our parents left us and not hand it to our kids, guess what? Pretty good gift.
Level up and enter a new map, a new territory that's unknown, and that's where we want to go. So,
well, we're cleaning up all the darkness in the world too, right? Because we were part of it in some lifetime, or our lineage was part of it. So we're healing humanity, the whole game.
Yeah, it is us. So just as we're reaching the end, if anybody is interested in this stuff, go to my website, thespiritualgamer.com, one word. There's the free ebook, which is a gift, and it'll explain the process I created. And you can book a free discovery call with me for 20 minutes and talk to me about stuff. And of course, it's not about what I think you need. It's about what you need. And from that, if we're in total alignment and I'm confident I can help you, then you move forward and see what happens. So.
Absolutely. And working with someone like Benjamin is going to keep you accountable. It's going to make you aware of and reflect for you maybe how gaming is part of your life, but you don't even realize it, and how you can make little tweaks and bumps, and he'll give you the cheat codes or the God level modes through his experience so that you can start using them in yours and see big changes.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's awareness, and you can hear this young man has amazing awareness, and we resonated immediately as soon as we talked. When I first heard gaming, I was kind of like, oh, question mark, because there's a lot of negative stuff, but essentially we are playing the game of life, and we've done it many, many, many lifetimes, and we're like Obi-Wan or whatever, and we're now ascending to the point where we're living on, if we can clear this or whatever. And we're going to hold all of our past experiences, all our past knowledge, all our past, because I feel that stuff coming into my world and my reality, each time I up level, all of a sudden I know stuff from past lives, and I know that I shouldn't do that, or this thing could be obsessive compulsive to me, or which is addiction. So all of a sudden we're just kind of like being fully aware of all the different versions of us that have ever existed until we've perfected and we're all of it all at once.
Yeah, everything, everywhere, all at once.
There's a movie called that, right?
Yeah, I just watched it the other day. It's great.
It is. It's cool. So I want to thank Benjamin. Is there anything else on Facebook, or is there a Spiritual Gamer Facebook group, or is it just your timeline?
Yeah, I do have the Spiritual Gamer Facebook group as well. So you can search for that, and I'd love to have anybody there. And I've been starting to step into lives talking about different various topics, so those will continue. And then I do have a TikTok as well, the Spiritual Gamer.
Okay.
I think those links are on my website, and if not, if anybody's interested, DM me. And there's, I'm exploring different stuff on all of them. So
okay. And are they in your bio on Facebook as well? That could be helpful.
I don't think so. I'll have to go in there and post them in, actually.
Okay. No, it's just a collection point that you're seeing us on Facebook. So, and I'll get you afterwards, or I'll put it in the bottom. I'll put your name and tag you or whatever, so that people can just click straight on you instead of having to dig. So
yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Paul.
And I thank you, and a beautiful conversation. And I'm just going to end the stream. Hopefully we'll stay in the room.
Yeah.
Let's do that.